Could I ask you, of the 18,300 mortgages in Project Glass, how many of them have the mortgages, the account holders of the mortgages, not engaged with the bank for over 7 years?
So the slide that was passed around this morning breaks the potential old sale into a number of cohorts. So the untreated block, the 1.9 billion, is the essentially customers who have not engaged or have engaged but have failed treatments. Now that represents about 13,000 accounts, 10,000 properties. What element of those are over 7 years, I can't say here. But I'll give you a flavour of it.
You have a press statement which says some account holders have not engaged with the bank for over 7 years. Mm-hmm. So now you're coming before the Finance Committee. I'm asking how many? You can say some for your own press statement, so how many have not engaged for over 7 years?
Yeah, I don't have that figure with me, but I'll give you a sense of, on average, it takes us 32 attempts for a customer to speak to us in this category about their mortgage. So that's an average figure, it's not a high or low figure. So on average it will take 32 attempts for us to speak to the right party about the debt that's owing. So that'll give you a flavour of some of the challenges that we face when we're dealing with customers who won't engage.
Why you said in your press statement, which was well covered by the media, that some account holders haven't engaged for over 7 years, especially if you're not willing to give us the figures today about how many haven't engaged for over 7 years.
Sorry, it's not that I'm not willing, Deputy. I don't have that figure to hand.
Can you give us the figure in the course of the next week?
Absolutely, yeah.
And why is it included in the press statement? What's the purpose of saying that some people haven't engaged for over 7 years?
Just like the purpose of giving you the figure of 32, to give a flavour of some of the challenges that our borrowers and the banks are facing in terms of this long-running issue. It's as simple as that.
I think it's more simple than that. We started as a management team in 2012 under the mandate of the Troika to execute long-term forbearance. So 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 is 7 years.
The purpose not to paint those who haven't engaged for over 7 years, but by extension all of those in Project Glass, as people who aren't engaging with the bank, shouldn't be respected by people. They're people who are trouble. They're not people who really should be treated as human beings who have the right to access to homes. And basically to paint them in a certain light to mean that it's okay to throw them to the vultures. That's why that was there. It's why it was given such prominence. It could be 7 years, it could be 6 years, it could be 5 years, but that's the purpose. It's to demean those people, and then by extension all of those in Project Glass.
I don't think it's there to demean. I think our track record in supporting customers in financial difficulty, 30,000 treatments is a lot of treatments, and other approaches over the last 6 years which we've outlined shows that we're not short of effort in trying to work with customers to find the right solution. The point we're trying to make this morning is that because of needing to make the bank safer and enable it to grow, we're now running out of options.
But even where you have engaged with people and people have engaged with you and have come up with solutions, split mortgages, etc., you're still willing to throw them to the vultures. So I'm not sure that does display a whole lot of caring for the interests of your customers.
So I suppose, how would I reply to that? So I've sat here before on other issues, and the bank has been criticised for not meeting its regulatory requirements. Reducing our NPL ratio is a regulatory requirement. So the point is that where we are today, there is a very clear set of guidance from our regulator in terms of NPL percentage. They're the facts.
They're the facts, but the consequence doesn't have to be that you sell these people's mortgages or you sell the mortgages of buy-to-let properties where there are tenants, to vulture funds who are simply going to be after the shortest, quickest book possible with no concern whatsoever for the interests of these people. I mean, one doesn't follow from the other. Yes, you have to reduce your non-performing loans. It's your logical leap to say, therefore, that means that we've no choice but to pursue this strategy in terms of the sale of Project Glass.
Well, we've used a wide range of options since 12, right? We've used short-term treatments, we've used long-term treatments. We're desperately keen to get to scale mortgage to rent as quickly as we can. We've used assisted voluntary sale. The point I'm making is that we are running out of options, and a option we have to consider now is loan sales.
Just to deal with, there's been a lot of focus, and rightly so, on the question of owner-occupiers who make up about 14,000 of the project loss. But the statement you make that, as the Governor has pointed out, the evidence does not support the narrative that the secondary buyers are managing the loans any more aggressively than the original banks were, that certainly doesn't hold in terms of the treatment of buy-to-lets. And my concern here isn't primarily for the owners of buy-to-lets, but for the tenants. There's been a whole number of quite horrific cases from Tyrrellstown in West Dublin, Leaside is ongoing in Cork, Strand Apartments in Limerick, of vulture funds getting their hands on many units of accommodation, one location, and moving quickly to either hike up rents or to people in order to supposedly renovate, then hike up rents. Do you have any concern for the tenants of buy-to-lets which are included in the project loss?
Any comments from the team before any comments?
No, I think again it's a question for the potential buyer of those properties. I'm not sure we can speak to how they might manage or service the loans if they're sold.
That's fine, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? You wash your hands of it, hand it over to someone else to do the dirty work, and then, well, it's not your fault, and formally it's not your fault, but you sold these people's homes in a sense to vultures who don't care about them at all. I'm not saying you care about them very much, but at least you're under state ownership, can be put under pressure.
We actually don't control those properties today. It's the landlords, the people who borrowed money on those properties, who control the properties. To give an example, we have offered a voluntary surrender campaign to buy-to-let customers, and through that campaign, in 3 months, we gathered 1,300 properties, of which 2/3 of those properties remain tenanted, and indeed we intend that they should remain tenanted, and we will sell them back into the market to new landlords or new owners who want to occupy them. So today we cannot control who rents those properties or how they rent them, that's not. We just manage the loan that is associated with those properties, and indeed a buyer is buying the loan from the landlord, and therefore can interact with that landlord in a different way to us. Indeed, a landlord may find a better solution with a fund than they can find with us at this moment.
Yeah, but I think the evidence is, and I wouldn't be without criticism of you dealing with buy-to-lets, but the evidence is that the vulture funds are going to be a lot worse in terms of the treatment of tenants. I think that is demonstrated by what's already taken place. Feel free to come back on that. I'll just ask another question, which is that you said kind of, on the one hand, that it's early days for Project Glass, and so the process of consultation with the Minister and so on hasn't taken place. But on the other hand, in response to Deputy Doherty about what if you didn't get a buyer, you were quite quick to say, well, there's definitely interest. So what is the time frame for the sale of Project Glass, and where in that time frame would the process of consultation with the Minister take place?
So the time frame isn't defined. I mean, it's flexible by way of our approach as we gather interest and understand the ins and outs of this portfolio. It's obviously quite a large portfolio. In that regard, we did state that earlier on that our regulator expects us to reduce NPLs over the medium term. Indeed, we have over the medium term to complete this project. It would be our ambition that it would happen this year. But we know, based on the nature and the size of this portfolio, that things can be drawn out and delayed for lots of different reasons. So we'll wait to see how that evolves.
And when would the consultation with the Minister take place? Process.
Under the framework agreement, the consultation with the Minister would take place when things would become in a more firmer sense, i.e. where the board would be starting to make firm decisions about selling the portfolio, and at that stage the consultation would take place with the Minister.
On average, I mean, I'm not looking for specifics here, but what's the gap between that and the sale actually taking place? It's a month, a couple of months, that kind of period of time, or?
There isn't really an average. This is such a large portfolio, and indeed it's already in the public domain that we have consulted with the Minister with regard to the portfolio at this stage, not seeking his consent, but in effect bringing him up to speed with regard to where it is. And indeed, we're putting a lot of information into the public domain today with regard to the performance of that portfolio, etc., so as to help this engagement. So it really depends, Deputy. There's no fixed time and there's no average.
Just to clarify, the consultation with the Minister that's set out in the framework agreement, that has not taken place?
The formal consultation has not taken place, but we have spoken to the Minister about this portfolio, and indeed it's on the record by way of a parliamentary answer that when the Minister became aware of this portfolio.
And just to repeat the question, that's my last question, is if the Minister accurately represents the views of the Parliament, and I would think the people, and he says, I don't want you to go ahead with this sale to vulture funds, I want you to find an alternative solution, be it selling it to another bank, pursuing it more aggressively yourselves, how will you deal with that?
We would consider every option. That's a hypothetical question, right? I mean, if there are other options put in front of us, myself, my CFO and the board will consider all those options.
Thanks.
Thanks,